All right, y'all are live.
All right, welcome in. A beautiful Friday here on the First Coast. The countdown is on. There's no question about it. We just have a couple of Thursdays to get to before we get to the NFL draft. Joe C. from XL Primetime with our Friday stream that we put out to all of Duval and beyond. There's Coach Dave Campo looking sharp as ever in his trophy room. Okay, that means he's got rings and hardware from Super Bowls past that he definitely can flash when he needs to. Exactly. All right, so good morning, Coach. You fired up and ready to go?
Yep. Good morning, Joe. And listen, I was born ready to go. I'm looking forward to it getting a little closer to the draft, but I'm ready to roll.
Yeah, here we are. We've got the Final Four tomorrow night. We've got an NCAA championship Monday night. Hopefully, the team just a little west of us in Gainesville and Hogtown, as a proud Gator alum, they'll be cutting down the nets Monday night. We will see, but all Duval focused on that draft, which will come up Thursday night, April 24th. And here we are. We've moved into April. It's hard to believe we're already in the fourth month of 2025, Coach. This offseason, as we start to look at maybe some of the draft prospects this offseason, a lot of changes, and it's kind of flown by, has it not?
Well, yeah. I mean, time flies, especially the older we get. But just the newness of everything is keeping everybody looking at different things. And I think it just goes a little quickly when you're in that mode, of looking at some guys and seeing what the staff is doing, who they've hired. And it's an interesting time, especially in a new regime coming in.
Yeah, exactly. And I tell you what, we've heard over the last handful of days. Earlier in the week, we had the owners' meetings down in Palm Beach, and we definitely had some thoughts from Liam Cohen that we were able to hear what he had to say as far as every waking moment. He's been working side by side with the new general manager, James Gladstone. And then Gladstone, when he sat down with Johnny Osher, you can definitely check that out on Jaguars.com. And he was talking about not only what Liam and he have been doing, but also what Tony Baselli brings to the equation. Last night, The Hunt, one of the just great pieces of production from the Jaguars.com crew, they dropped it. And look, there's a lot of excitement, as well there should be, Coach. But as James Gladstone correctly said, this fan base needs to be excited in the regular season more than just in the offseason.
Yeah, obviously all the guys that they bring in, whether it's the coaching staff or whether it's the players in the draft or whether it's free agency, we won't know exactly what's going to happen until we get a chance to watch them on the field. And, you can even get might not get even a strong sense watching them in training camp. It's really when the whistle blows at the start of the season in that first ball game, you're going to have a pretty good feel of what they've done. And obviously some of it's going to be, in fact, I think a lot of it's going to be with this draft. And so, there's going to be a development period in there as well with the guys that are playing a lot.
Yeah, it's simple as that, is that you've got to see their plan hatch. You've got to kind of get legs underneath this new franchise or new leadership of this franchise and see what it looks like. So I thought today you and I would start to break down some of the key positions. And look, we can name a number of positions that this football team needs to address. It's not like a football team that can go into the draft saying we're one or two players away. We know that ain't the truth. So now we need to identify the three main areas that we feel like they need to attack. And this also may be a little bit of a moving target. So at the very least, Coach, when you think of the three main areas of need for this football team, where does it fall for you after what they did in free agency?
Well, I don't think that they really did much in the defensive side of the ball. And I think, one of the things that I think is extremely important, obviously, is the ability to create stuff inside on defense. So when you look at our defensive group right now, you've got Armstead coming in. You don't know what he's going to do because obviously he didn't do what he was supposed to do last year. Yeah. Hopefully he's at a position where he should be playing, what he's done in the past more. So that should be good. You got a guy in Mason Smith, obviously, that everybody's waiting to see, which I really like his athletic ability and some of the things that he's shown, but he was a a scratch last year. We didn't know if he was injured or not injured or what. So to me, the defensive interior is going to be extremely important because I think it really helps our two outside guys, which I think are good football players. I don't know that we have a special one there yet because Josh Allen is a one-year guy, basically, in what he's done. Maybe a two-year guy out of his career at this point. And I think Walker is still a work in progress, but a really good football player, but the more pressure they get inside. So I would say that's probably my number one thought. My number two thought would be in the offensive line. I think that's something that they're always going to be looking at this year. They did some things in the offensive line in the draft, which I think sets the floor, as they talk about, to where they can go out and play with this group, which helps them in the draft. They don't have to just grab somebody that they don't feel is one of the better players necessarily because of a specific need, but they need to protect Trevor Lawrence. It's very simple, and they need to be able to run the football. So the interior part of it, so that he can step up and run the football to help him, that's going to be important. And then I think really the third one to me would be a starting corner, possibly across from our right corner.
Yeah. And I do think that right now, and you guys, if you're watching on social and you guys want to jump in, Yoda posted it. It's real simple. If you guys throw a question our way, we'll put it up on the screen if it's good. But the way he set today's show up is, what's the most important position the Jaguars need to fix? And Coach just threw three main categories at you. So I feel like those are the ones that we're going to zero in on right now. Offensive line, protect Trevor. Defensive line, particularly interior, do something to make this pass rush and basically owning that line of scrimmage, be it against the run, be it against the pass, make it better. And then you look across from Tyson Campbell, who's out there? Are they going to go and draft a guy that's going to go opposite him and he's going to represent the future? Or is it Jarian Jones? We'll at least set up a little bit of a, not a debate, but just a couple of different ways of looking at this thing as opposed to whether or not they're going to go 100% to replace that side of the ball opposite Tyson Campbell. All right, Coach. So getting back to what you said about Trayvon Walker and Josh Hines-Allen, by the way, Josh Allen has more sacks than Josh Hines-Allen. Okay. So this is just pure and simple. When you look at the stats from last year, 41 needs to be better. He got paid a ton of money. We all know that. Big contract. The Trevor contract is the biggest, but the Josh Hines-Allen contract, second biggest that they signed this past offseason. Shad committed to a lot of money, and 41 needs to make sure that he makes more plays this year. And obviously what you're thinking, and I agree with you, interior defensive line has got to help him get to the quarterback a little bit more.
The great teams, and this is what makes the fifth pick very interesting, because in order to win in this league, and I'm talking about really win, right, you have to have some playmakers on this football team, like the Michael Irvins, like the Jamar Chases, like who you can name a bunch of them, the Emmitt Smiths from the old days. Mm-hmm. You have to have some playmakers. Who are the playmakers on this team?
Very true.
And I think that's really something that you have to look at, because in all honesty, both of those outside rushers, and that's why I bring it up, mm-hmm, both of those outside guys are really, really good football players, Joe. Mm-hmm. But are they playmakers? And they have not done that. So they need some help with the interior of the defense to help them force the ball to the outside a little bit more and let those guys make some plays. And that's why I bring that up, because Josh Allen has proven in a couple of years that he can be a playmaker. But the guys that you talk about that are really playmakers in the league, what differentiates those guys? It's consistency. It's not that they have a one-year deal where they're great. They're great every year. The Joneses, the Donalds, the guys that are guys that do it year to year. So we need to improve that. And that's where that fifth pick, when you start talking about an Ashton Genty, or you talk about some of these guys that you think are going to be playmakers, who knows? They may pick one of those guys. But we're talking about these guys right here because that's a need for the football team, in my opinion.
Yeah, fixing the biggest areas. So let's stay on the defensive line. Let's throw a few guys out there. A little bit of this is pie in the sky, Coach, meaning the Jaguars are picking 5th overall, but they may not see an opportunity to get an Abdul Carter. But you and I have talked about him. I'm going to include him among my top 5 defensive linemen, of course. If you get him, the dynamics of what you can do up front defensively improve dramatically, and we can argue whether or not you're drafting a backup at number 5, but I love what you've said. You can play him off the ball. You can do a lot of things with Abdul Carter. And then we have to put, at least I would put, Mason Graham up there. I believe you agree. And then after that, I think you and I need to arrive at 2 or 3 more guys. Now, I'm just going to throw Kenneth Grant up there as one of the guys that I certainly would like to see them perhaps land in the 2nd round. It could be a Kenneth Grant. It could be a Walter Nolan. Both are big men. Both are playing inside. Kenneth Grant represents more of the one technique, which I hope you'll explain to our viewers and listeners, because I believe that's the biggest concern right now. Not necessarily the 3 technique. I think the 1 technique is the most important part of that defensive front in terms of a fix needed.
Yeah. First of all, Abdul Carter is a no-brainer. Yeah. If he's there, number one, you might get a 2-position guy, but there's no question he's a guy that you look at and you say, hey, this guy, unless we're completely messed up in our evaluation, is a Pro Bowl guy, an all-pro guy in the making. He's got great explosion, quickness, all those kind of things. Where he lacks a little bit is power. So you're probably not going to have him, when you say defensive line, you're probably talking about an edge with him for sure. But if he's there, you have to run the ticket up there to pick him. When you're looking for a 3 technique, okay, you're looking at Mason Graham, and you're looking at a Harmon. Okay, those guys are 3 technique type guys. Harmon is a guy that's explosive. He's quick. He's a 3 technique guy that makes things happen. If you're looking for a nose, you're looking at Nolan. You're looking at Grant. Now I've watched a lot more of Grant, and I'm not sure that he might not be the pick there, even though people have him down a little bit. He is a physical, powerful, quick hands, strong, a guy that's pretty darn good laterally. His footstep quickness is just as good as any 3 technique out there. Where his weakness is lateral. He's not the lateral guy that Graham is. He's a guy that's going to hold the point. He's going to whip anybody one-on-one. He's going to force a double team. And that's something that we're lacking right now. He does have some pass rush moves. He doesn't use them as much as he does his bull rush. I think he's actually, once he develops that, he's going to be a pretty good pass rusher as well. So I like him.
I think if you could just go back real quick, and I don't know that this could happen, but we're looking at Mason Smith trying to develop into a star. I question him being a top 50 pick last year, but when he was dominant in college, we saw the flash, the potential. Then he had a pretty significant knee injury, and then he just did not get back to that level that you'd like to see him at. Flashed a little bit last year, but also was a healthy scratch a little too often last year. And then they've got Eric Armstead. He's a year away probably from stepping away, but they definitely need some good plays from him and a lot of good snaps from him. But go back to your days when you were coaching on the defensive side for Jacksonville, when they were playoff performing defenses. And Marcus Stroud and John Henderson, 2 huge human beings, they could flip-flop between the 1 and the 3, could they not? And do you see that as a possibility depending on where Jacksonville goes with the draft?
Well, again, you have to have 2 guys that can play either one because you can't flip your tackles.
Okay.
So if they start shifting guys going strong one way, strong the other way, those guys have to be able to slide in the 4-3. And when you talk about that position, it's a position that kind of has to be interchangeable. Although, again, when you watch, here's the thing. When you watch Grant and Mason Graham, you're looking at two different guys from the standpoint of their lateral ability. But both of those guys are pretty physical now. One of them's 306, the other one is 330 something. So you would say, oh, well, the 330 guy's probably better against a double team. But I know a lot of three technique guys that we had back in the day that could split the double team. Okay. In other words, they don't necessarily have to hold the point, but they get off so quick that the double team really doesn't have an opportunity to set up.
Right.
So, again, it just depends on the type of guy you're looking for. I guarantee you Mason Graham has got a chance. He's a poor man's, and I'm not comparing him necessarily. That's why I'm calling him a poor man. But he's a Donald, Jones, guys that are athletic enough laterally that they can move around. Grant's not that guy. Grant's an inside John Henderson player.
Lock down, take up that real estate.
Absolutely. And so we need to, that's why when I talk about the inside guys, it depends on where our defensive line guys and defensive coordinator look at what fits their scheme, and the 4-3 defense, you can do a lot of things with a 4-3 defense. When you kick the front one way or another, the 3 technique is the 3 technique. He's going to be on a guard, whether you're in an under defense or an over defense. The difference is, though, we just mentioned before, if teams start shifting the tight ends, now all of a sudden you have to slide the front. Right. And now that guy has to play some nose. And again, the centers aren't the best blockers in the league. So if you get a quick guy on the nose, that can be a factor as well, especially in the pass rush.
Yeah, and I think that's what you're referring to, is that if Mason Graham can emerge and develop into that kind of guy, I feel like I've fallen into a trap of painting him as a disappointing 5th pick overall. I got to get away from that, because he still does represent a very important position, of an ability and an aptitude to play the position. And so I got to remind myself of that instead of going, dang, I wanted to see somebody else in that 5th spot. All right, here are a few other guys. And if we're looking at the top defensive lines, top defensive line prospects, you have to throw Jalen Walker in. You brought him up a week ago. Matt Miller was on Jaguars Today earlier this week, and he definitely identified Jalen Walker as a guy who comes up to the line of scrimmage and can come from off the edge and wreak havoc. Mike Green is from Marshall. He's also been moving up draft boards. He's a guy that a lot of people like. Michael Williams, a guy from the University of Georgia. You got both Walker and Williams from Georgia as two guys that definitely represent some talent along the line of scrimmage. Who else would you have up there in your top 5 defensive linemen?
Well, again, Nolan. We haven't really talked much about Nolan. Nolan is a very explosive athlete. He's a guy that can play nose or 3 technique. He's a little bit smaller. He's in the 296 range, but he's a guy that's very explosive off the ball. He's a guy that's great lateral ability, process. He's like Graham. That's the kind of guy that you're looking at when you look at Nolan. I really like him because he's a very athletic and he's a physical guy. The problem with him, he's high at times. His arm length isn't really great like Graham. Very similar type guys. But I like him as a player. There's no question about it. And then, again, I like Williams. I think he's a good player. I think that's somebody that they have to look at.
Okay. I believe you when you start looking at the guys that can impact interiorly. Now, Walter Nolan went through Texas A&M, and then ultimately moved on to another SEC school. He definitely was good at both of them. Lane Kiffin captured that talent, put him in an Ole Miss uniform, and the rest is history. Most of the guys, it's funny that we're talking about, Coach, are coming out of the SEC. You got two Big 12 guys Big 10 guys in Mason Graham and Abdul Carter, and then we'll see where else they might look. All right, let's jump to the offensive line. Because I know
before we go, Joe, can I let me just go back to Walker, okay, the kid from the linebacker,
from Georgia,
edge guy. Walker, you're getting 2 for 1. You're getting an edge guy and a linebacker, probably more than any of the other guys. He's a hybrid, so you have to make a decision. What do you do if you bring him in? He is definitely worth a top 5 pick, in my opinion, because he is explosive. He's an outstanding athlete. He can make things happen. He can run around guys. He can play off the ball. There's no question. The problem is that's what you have. You have a linebacker, as opposed to an edge that can play the run and the pass. He's really a pass rusher. And if you take him, you're counting on him being able to play off the ball.
Right.
And now you're eliminating some guys that we have on the ball club right now, the Lloyds, the Mumas, where do they go? Well, you've improved your roster probably, but that's a decision that has to be made there. Yeah. But he's definitely a guy that can get on the edge. If you had him, you'd probably put him on the edge and move Walker inside on third downs. And I'll tell you, there's no guards that are going to block Walker inside in the pass rush. So he becomes a factor just because of that alone.
Yeah, that part's appealing. And the other thing that blew my mind when looking at some Micah Parsons and Abdul Carter comparisons, because they're both Penn State guys, but Micah Parsons has this unbelievable ability to, as you described earlier, when it looks like if you walk into the center of the defensive line, you're inviting contact with some bigs, okay? As we always describe it from the Ed Orgeron days, it's bowling balls and butcher knives. It is a tough area. But Micah Parsons at 6'3" can just slither and snake his way through those. Right. And you want to see an Abdul Carter, a Jalen Walker, whoever it might be, develop into that type of guy for this football team. If you're lucky to get him.
I think Walker's that type of a guy. If he moves it, I'm talking about Trayvon Walker.
Yeah,
moving inside is that kind of a guy. Not as nifty, maybe, but he's athletic. They would have a hard time blocking him. So you would move the Walker that we're talking about, the linebacker. He'd be the outside rush man, I think, on third down.
Yeah, but would you agree Trayvon Walker needs to become more of that guy? Like, there's another element and dimension of him that they have to find.
Yeah, he has to get a little bit bigger in my mind to be that kind of a guy.
Yeah. All right, so let's pop over to the offensive line, and then we'll hop back to the cornerbacks and safeties on the defensive side before we're done. If you guys want to jump in the chat, you can real easily find us on X, all of the social channels. Yoda will put us up wherever we can on 1010XL, so we appreciate you guys checking out our show on Friday mornings. I'm thinking, Yoda, I'm going to make a suggestion. Instead of 9:30, we're going to go at 9:25, and it'll be 92.5. You like that? You like that? That's not a bad call. So we'll try and do that maybe next Friday. All right. So let's get to the offensive linemen. And we're talking about guys. Will Campbell's been mentioned at the top of the offensive line draft board a ton. And then you had big Armand, big man Membo after the 40-yard time at the combine. He started to shoot up the charts, and he even went ahead of Will Campbell in recent days as far as some of the mocks that are coming out. So you got those two guys that you would throw out there, Coach. I'm going to throw out Tyler Banks as another guy, 40-plus starts. I want to say maybe 4 dozen starts, All-America at Texas, can move inside. He is a big human being, but definitely is a guy that is good when it comes to being physical at the line of scrimmage, in the run game, pass protection. You definitely want to see him develop a little bit more. But anyway, I'm going to throw his name out there as one of the guys that I like if they were looking at the possibility of drafting a tackle and moving him inside.
I agree. I think Banks, if you put them in an order, it would be Campbell number 1 to me, because he's he shows that ability. But he and Membo are very similar guys. I think the arm length on Campbell, everybody's talking about, but listen, he's athletic. He's got really good ability to handle the position. He's pretty powerful, and I think that's where you look at Membo. I think Membo and Banks both could play guard, in my opinion. I think those guys could play guard, and then a year maybe be the tackle. You don't know that, but I think the one thing I always talk about, Boudreaux talks about. Paul Boudreaux, very good offensive line coach, was with the Jags in the day. Mm-hmm. He said, give me 5 tackles and I'll teach one of them to snap. Yeah. Well, the guys we're talking about there are both big downstairs. What I mean by that is they've got the big calves, thighs.
Trunk.
Yeah, and that's the problem with Cleveland, our left offensive guard. He doesn't have that. And so there's a possibility they could take one of those tackles there at number 5, and he could start out. We've got 2 guys in Walker Little and the other tackle.
Yeah.
And he could start at guard and move outside. So I think really Membo, Banks, and Campbell, and if you throw Simmons in there, there are guys there that can play the guard position and still be a tackle in the future.
Yeah, and there's at least been a little bit of chatter, and Ryan Wilson, who does a great job with the first pick on CBS Sports HQ, he was talking about Josh Simmons a little bit with an injury that he had that at least slowed him down just in terms of workouts and combine performances and pro day and so on and so forth. But he's still a legit guy. If you look a little further down, there's another cat from Ohio State and Donovan Jackson that they might be able to land a little bit later on, which I also like. I'm not married to the idea that you 100% have to have a big man with that 5th pick overall, that there's still a lot of good ones that you can get to as this draft unfolds. A couple of other guys that I at least put on my list. We all have talked about Gray Zabel, so I'll set him aside for a second. But Tyler Booker from Bama is another guy that if you can get him, maybe even move up late in the first round, or if you're lucky enough to get him early second, but interiorly, he can be a very, very good player for this football team. And then I got to go with the mullet man, Tate Ratledge. Bring that mullet from Athens down to Duval, coach. I would take him in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I think the guys you're talking about there are probably early second round, possibly at 36. Even maybe into the 3rd round with Ratledge. I'm not quite sure, but right. I know that those guys are all good football players. And the one thing I really like is that Simmons is a guy that is very powerful and nasty. And that's one of the things that they're looking at, and again, I don't think he's a 5th pick guy, but I certainly think he's a late first round, if you move back, type of a player.
Yeah, I think that's the guy that if you do look at, and maybe injury concerns causes him to tumble down the board a little bit, but those are the types of guys. And I think when you and I are doing this exercise, I'm looking at the idea that they have 4 picks in the first 3 rounds. We need to identify guys. I keep preaching on XL Primetime to Matt Hayes and Leon that, hey, the 1 round does not a draft make. You know that right. From the guys that you were able to get in later rounds. You've got to be good in each round. And I'm just hoping there's enough good examples of guys that they can land if a Ratledge were to fall to late second or early third, and they combo those 2 third-round picks to get to them, whatever it might be. Those types of guys you can get later in the draft, and you're going to get a good player.
Well, really, if you look at the whole thing, Campbell, Membo, Banks, Simmons, Carnley from Oregon, Milam from West Virginia, and then you put the guards in there, Zabel, who you said Ratledge and Booker. Those guys are all in the top 3 rounds. I mean, there's no question that every one of those guys is good enough to be picked in those rounds. You just don't know where we sit as far as who we're taking in. We've got 4 of them in those 4 rounds. So 3 rounds. So, again, those guys are all good football players.
All right, let's hit the secondary before we are done. We stream every Friday morning, so hopefully you guys will make it part of your Jaguar day on Fridays. But let's take a look at some of the cornerbacks. And I'll admit it, Coach, I may have put a little head fake on you. I included at least one safety that I'm 100% in love with, but I want to throw these guys out. And let's at least start off with the very obvious. Old Travis Hunter is at the tip top of a lot of people's wide receiver draft boards and their cornerback boards. If he's there all day, we take him. You and I agree on that 100%. Who's after that in your mind? Trey Amos is a guy out of Ole Miss that I earmarked, and then I started looking at a couple of other guys that definitely would be pretty good, that are reasonable to get. Maxwell Hairston, the cornerback out of Kentucky, really, really good player. Will Johnson, I just don't think it's going to fall where the Jaguars could land him in any draft scenario. Am I wrong there, or do you think he might be a guy that they could target?
Yeah, he's been a little bit of the injury bug as well, but he definitely is. If you look at him, you're looking at Hunter number 1. You're looking probably at Johnson number 2. So he's definitely going to go up there fairly early. Now, I don't necessarily, again, depending upon what you're looking for, I don't know that he's a 5th round pick. That's a 5th pick in the draft. I think he's definitely a 1st round pick. Another guy I like is Barron, the corner from Texas. I think he's got some ability to move. He's quick. He's a violent guy. He's a really violent tackler. That's the thing that sticks out to me. Plus, he can run. He's fast. So you could take those kind of guys. He's got great route recognition. He's got great football IQ. I think his only weakness really is build-up speed and his frame a little bit. He's not a huge guy, but neither is Hunter. I mean, you're taking an athlete at that position, but he brings it. He brings the wood right there. I like Hairston. I would say that if you looked at them in order, in my mind, I had Hunter, Johnson, Barron. I had Morrison from Notre Dame. I like Morrison from Notre Dame. I think he's another guy that stands out as a guy that can make some things happen. Revel, the guy from East Carolina, I like him. I mean, there's some guys that can play in those top 3 rounds now. And then your guy, Hairston, I've got him right there. So those guys are all pretty darn good football players.
And then, and we can, there's varied opinions on all these guys because of what you said are the key things is, can they track the ball quickly? Do they have enough speed? Are they physical enough? Size-wise, how do they measure up to the good wide receivers that are out there? And another guy that I just want to throw in there for a quick part of this before we wrap up, I think the safety position is still hugely important for this football team. They've got a couple of guys. They brought in one from Houston. They're certainly having to play out the contract with Darnell Savage, at least for the here and now. They got Antonio Johnson back there, so they may feel okay with what they got. But Nick Emanwari is just such a stud, a Gamecock, a proud South Carolina defensive star, and he can just do so many things. And I heard from Bryant McFadden, who just said this guy just jumps off the tape in terms of how physical he can be. And let's face it, Coach, they need those patrollers, those leaders, those ones that can strike fear when they're coming at you. I would love to see a guy like that. Don't think it'll happen, but I would love to see it happen.
Yeah, I really love him. I think in my opinion, it's a coin flip between he and Starks, the safety from Georgia.
Yeah,
I like both of those guys. I think they're both physical, can go get the ball. But I like Emanwari number 1. But I'd flip the coin on those 2 guys. And then another guy that I really like is Watts from Notre Dame. He's a very physical player, smart. They had a great secondary at Notre Dame, and he was the band leader of that group. And I would say those are the 3 guys that I would say are definite guys that can help our football team for sure.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned him, and I really do feel like Al Golden, as much as we rip on him for his terrible head coaching job that he did down at the U, he was a really good defensive coordinator in South Bend, and he took a guy like Benjamin Morrison and a number of other guys, and he made them they were fierce,
Yeah.
and so his instruction alone, coach, made some good ball players.
Yeah, I think it's really important that you come out of a good program, especially at back there, because you're the best receivers are in the best programs, and so you're seeing them against the top guys, and I think that's important to see, how they react in those situations. And to me, Morrison, the kid, the corner, he's a good player, and they did a good job with him. But I like Watts. I think he's a guy that would help us. I would take him, if they're looking for a safety, I'd take him at number 36. I mean, they're all those guys that we're mentioning are guys that help our football team, in my opinion, the top 3 rounds with 4 picks. You don't know where they're going to fall, but with 4 picks in that area, I think you're getting good players.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, let's leave it at that because that fired me up, and I'm with you. So let's see where they go, and we definitely will keep on this theme of improving this football team with key players in the first 3 rounds that can step on the field. They may not all be automatic starters, but they can compete and make this football team better. So good stuff out of you, Coach. I love it.
Good, fun. Let's keep doing it.
All right. So every Friday, 9:25. That means you got to move your clock up just a little bit. That was a TC move on my part right there.
I'm a 5 o'clock get up guy, so I don't have any problem making it. You can move it back even farther, but I like your reasoning for going to the 9:25.
All right, so we'll try and do that 9:25 tomorrow, next Friday. Yoda, Jacob, we say thank you to our producer. Great job as always, bro. We appreciate it. Young man's heading off to the Final Four to go shoot some stuff for the Florida Gators, and let's hope that they move past Auburn, get to that championship game Monday night, and there'll be plenty on the 1010XL social channels. All right, we are done. You and I are doing XL Primetime a little bit later on, and we'll bring up some of these suggestions that you made on both sides of the ball. Sound good?
And by the way, our podcast next week is going to be on Wednesday.
That's right. Yeah, I'm glad you said that. Yeah, so we'll be back next Wednesday. We'll start to drill down even more on some of these draft prospects. Good stuff. Appreciate all y'all tuning in. All of Duval, looking forward to the draft, and we are closing in on April 24th.